Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling. And man, I really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to spend with me and hang out with me for a little bit. We're going to be talking about educated bass today. Either whether it doesn't mean if they're highly educated bass or not very educated bass. You hear people using this term a lot. In my opinion, it's an oversimplification. There's a lot of misunderstanding about it. So I'm going to give you guys my opinion on this from my perspective, my experience, and hopefully it'll help you guys get some more fish as a result. Also, guys, before we get started, just wanted to let you guys know about the big bargain bin sale that's going on at Tackle Warehouse. They got a bunch of great sales going across the site right now. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. If you guys would like to use and bookmark that link, it's a good way to support Intuitive Angling here, as well as subscribing to the channel, becoming a channel member, and just using all the other links. So I really appreciate that. Everybody's been doing it. Okay, guys, one of the things that I have ever since I've been bass fishing, and specifically not just really ever since I've been bass fishing, but the last 5 years especially, you hear people talking about bass are educated. They're just highly educated. They're tough to catch, or maybe if you get on a body of water where they've never seen a lure, they're not hard to catch, they're easy to catch. So let's talk about what that means and the evolution of it and exactly how it got to that point. And does a bass get educated? I mean, is this actually a thing, or is this just sort of a figment of our imagination? Okay, this is a complicated topic. It's not as cut and dried as people think, because I can point to examples about bass being educated. Prime example is, when you go fishing on a heavily fished lake, fish are tough to catch. They're just harder to catch. And sometimes you can see bass following your lure, or you can see bass swimming, but they're just not interested in it. Prime example, guys, if you're fishing a reaction bait sometimes, like a swim bait or a glide bait or a jerk bait, you'll see bass that will follow your lure, and they get close to your lure, but they just seem like they're curious about it, but they're not going to bite it. That is a prime example of what I consider an educated bass, because if you're on a body of water that does not receive much fishing pressure, you hardly ever see that. I mean, it just hardly ever, never exists. Let me give you two different examples with that, what I'm talking about. This will illustrate it perfectly. I was practicing for a tournament down at Table Rock Lake about probably 2 or 3 years ago. And this tournament, I had like 2 or 3 days to practice. And the first day and I was jerkbait fishing. It was a March tournament. So the first day of practice down there, I had a pretty good day at fishing a jerkbait, maybe 5 years ago or so. And every fish that I caught, it's like I didn't see any followers whatsoever. Every fish that I caught was hooked, like with all three, treble hooks in their mouth. They just ate the thing. Okay, the second day of practice, and there's more people fishing, second day of practice, I got maybe half the bites, and I noticed that, a lot of the fish just had like 1 or 2 treble hooks in their mouth. And then the last day of practice, I got even half the amount of bites, and I noticed that a lot of the fish were caught just by the last treble hook. They weren't even getting the whole thing. And by the time the tournament rolled around, I would have these fish, I'd see them following the bait, not hit it. And in practice, I never saw any of them following it. But by the tournament started, they'll be following it, not hitting it. And then a lot of the ones I caught were hooked by 1 barb on the treble. That is an example of bass being educated to one specific lure. Fast forward to another trip I went to. I went on a trip with some friends of ours up at the Boundary Waters in Canada, which was this wilderness area up there. And you had to canoe into it, but you could still fish. And guys, those fish up there had not seen baits ever. And it was like, you can't believe how aggressive they were. They never followed it. They'd get, I don't care how long you fish, they'd get all 3 treble hooks every single time. So that is a prime example of bass that are educated versus not being educated. And I will say one thing about that. You hear all these people say about, oh, you got to harvest the bass or they're going to get overpopulated and they're going to get stunted. Bullshit. Guys, that Boundary Waters, we went up there, it gets 0 fishing pressure from humans, and it's full of big fish. I mean, full of big ones, and they're all healthy. So don't fall for that myth that the biologists say you've got to harvest bass out of lakes. That's not true. Okay, so what is the deal with this as far as what causes a bass to get educated? What is the mechanism that causes that? In my opinion, people do not realize how fast they evolve. They're evolutionary creatures like all of us are. Creatures evolve throughout their existence to adapt to their environment. It's like we've evolved as humans as far as, different, the way that our bodies work and our, the way we function. Some people, they're in different climates. They've evolved to look different, to adapt to the climate, to make it more, to make them more efficient to function in. And it's the same with bass. Bass have been on this planet for 3 million years. A lot of the archaeologists and experts say. And in order for a species to adapt to the changes within their environment over a course of 3 million years, you have to evolve quickly. You have to learn quick, you have to fail quick, and you have to adapt quick. I have seen it myself, and we've talked a lot about this before. When I started bass fishing 50 years ago, you could catch a lot of bass on very rudimentary looking lures that were very basic looking. They didn't have a lot of action. They didn't look very realistic, but you could catch a ton of fish on them. And now look at the high-tech lures we have. Look how realistic our lures are and how difficult it is to catch fish. And you'll never catch a fish with one of those rudimentary lures. If you're on a public body of water that, say, gets a lot of fishing pressure, I don't care if it's like a Lake Gunnersville or someplace or Sam Rayburn Lake or Chickamauga or even in the Ozark lakes here, you know how hard it is to catch bass with these high-tech, realistic-looking minnow lures or realistic-looking jerk baits or crank baits or swim baits. It's still hard to catch them, and you still get a lot of fish that follow them. But if you would go to those same lakes today, like tomorrow, if you and I went fishing at Lake Gunnersville or Lake Sam Rayburn, and I bought a box of lures that I caught fish on 50 or 60 years ago, I don't care how good the fishing is, you're probably not going to catch hardly anything, because those bass have evolved on some cellular level, like the DNA in them. They've changed internally. It's not anything that they have some type of a memory about. It's like they've evolved internally, to make those adaptations. It's a innate intelligence they have. It's just like how does a goose know how to fly from Canada down to South America, or how does the monarch butterfly know how to fly down to Central America, how to get down there? It's innate intelligence, and that's what bass have, and they adapt and they evolve quickly. This is what I'm talking about as far as bass being wary or bass being educated. It's not necessarily that they can intellectualize something, but they evolve internally to make these changes. So that's one of the big mysteries about fishing a lot of people don't understand, is how quick they adapt. Now they can adapt to short-term changes, just like with my jerkbait. Let's say, for example, you've got 30 fish living on a point, on a main lake point, and I come in there for 2 or 3 days in a row fishing this main lake point with my jerkbait or whatever I'm fishing, and they see this lure coming over their head over and over and over again. Yeah, there's a short-term education that they learn, from that point of view right then and there. But in the bigger picture, bass become educated by evolving, not to make mistakes. So that's just my opinion on it, my perspective on it, guys. Let me know what you think about it, and we'll check in later.